Hello and welcome to My Piano Method with me, Michelle Orp. This is my beginner to grade course, module 3. So now we're going to learn about dotted notes, how we play them and what they look like on the sheet music. So dotted notes, what do they look like and how do they work? Well, this is what they look like. So a simple dot following a note. If I were to put them on the stave, they would look like this. And what do they do? Well, a dotted note will extend the duration of a note by half of its original value. So if we were to take a quarter note, which we know is worth 1 beat, and if we were to add a dot, the dot is worth half of the note's original value, which is 1 beat in this case. So we know that this dot is worth half a beat. So a dotted quarter note is worth 1.5 beats. So if we were to do this with a half note, which we know is worth 2 beats, you guessed it, the dot is worth 1 beat, which means a dotted half note is worth 3 beats. And again, if we were to do this with a whole note, which we know is worth 4 beats, if we were to add a dot, the dot's worth half the value, which is 2. So therefore, a dotted full note is worth 6 beats. So how do we count this when we use it in music? Well, if I use a piece of music here with a time signature of 4/4, which we know is 4 quarter note beats in a bar, and if I was to put a dotted quarter note on there, we know that this is worth 1.5 beats. So we would count 1.5 beats, which would be 1 and 2. So there is our 1.5 beats. So we're holding that note down for 1 and 2. Now we need to fill in the 2 and. So you will usually see an 8th note here after the dotted quarter note beat, because that 8th note is worth half a beat. So you see this pattern a lot, a dotted quarter note beat followed by an 8th note beat. And this gives us 2 full beats. And it would sound like this. 1 and 2 and. So that's the sound you need to get used to hearing when you see this pattern. 1 and 2 and. So if I was to explain this a bit clearer, our time signature of 4 quarter note beats, there it is, 4/4. So I'll put those 4 quarter note beats onto the stave. I can count this quite simply, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if I was to use 8th notes instead, as we've learned before, 2 8th notes make up 1 quarter note. And to count this, we use the word and. So for this rhythm, I'll be counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So if I'm using a dotted quarter note beat, we will have to use an 8th note. So we'll be counting using the ands. So as you can see, I've got the dotted quarter note, which is worth 1.5 beats there. On this bar, I've also put in a quarter note for 3 and a quarter note for 4 and. But can you notice something that's not quite right about this bar? We only have 3.5 beats in this bar. And as we know from the time signature, we have to have 4 beats. So this 2 and here in the middle, this doesn't have anything right now. We have the 1 beat here, we have another beat here, and we have the 1.5 beat here. So we have 3.5 beats and we need 4 beats to complete this bar. So we have to put something here. So we'll use an 8th note because an 8th note is worth half a beat. Now this 8th note here is exactly the same as the 8th note that I've used in the middle bar, but because there's only one of them on their own in the bottom line of music, I've had to put a tail on it because I've not got another one to bar it. So we have to put a little tail on that so we know it's an 8th note. So there we have our full bar. We have a dotted quarter note, which is 1.5 beats. We then have the 8th note, which is half a beat. And then we have 2 quarter notes at the end, which is a beat each. So here we have our full bar of music. And this bar would sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, we don't have to put that eighth note there for that half a beat. The composer might not want you to play anything there. So remember, if he doesn't want you to play anything there, he would put in a rest. So we would put in this eighth note rest, but that still makes up 4 beats in the bar. We need to remember this pattern and remember what it means, because you're going to see it a lot in music. A dotted quarter note followed by an eighth note equals 2 beats. The same if we use the rest. This pattern uses 2 beats, and we need to know how to play it when we see it. So let's play using a dotted quarter note and using a dotted half note and see how it sounds. So first up, let's have a listen to what it sounds when we use a dotted quarter note followed by an eighth note. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so now let's listen to what it sounds like when we use a dotted half note. Now, as we've learned, a dotted half note is worth 3 beats. So to make up a 4-beat bar, I've put in a quarter note beat for the 4th beat. So this will sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So next we have the dotted whole note. Now, can you see a problem here? A dotted whole note is worth 6 beats, and using this time signature of 4/4, which is a very common time signature and one most composers use, a dotted whole note is worth 6 beats, but we only have 4 beats in each bar. So I can't put a dotted whole note in this bar because it's too many beats to fit in the bar. So I wouldn't use a dotted whole note here. If I wanted the musician to hold that note for 6 beats, I would actually use a tied note. So I would have a whole note in bar 1, and then I would use a half note in bar 2 and tie them together so that the musician knows to hold that note for 6 beats. And that's how I would do it while writing in with a time signature of 4/4. So where would you use a dotted whole note? Well, it would be a different time signature. So if I was to change this time signature to 6/4, which would mean that in this piece of music, there are 6 quarter note beats in each bar. Let's put them in. There you go, 6 quarter note beats in each bar. Now I can use a dotted whole note because 6 beats fits in. So I could put one in here like this. And this is where you might see this. Now at this level, you're never going to come across this. This time signature is rare anyway. And at grade 1, you're realistically only going to be using time signatures like 4/4 and 3/4. So you really don't need to worry about this. I just wanted you to know where you might see one and that they do exist, but don't worry too much about that. So concentrating on a dotted quarter note and a dotted half note, there is one more thing I do need to make you aware of. There are actually 2 ways that we can write 1.5 beats. The easiest way is like this. It's a dotted half note and it's really easy to see. But you could also write it like this. You could tie together a quarter note and an eighth note, and that gives you 1.5 beats. So why do we bother having the dotted quarter note? Well, simply because it's easier to read. As you can see, the top line here is much clearer than the bottom line. The bottom line, there's a lot more going on. It's harder for the musician to read, whereas the top line is clearer, which is why we use it. But you might see it written as the bottom line. The 2 eighth notes would probably be barred, but you might see it, so it's good. It's important that you understand it. But these 2 pieces of music, they look different, but they're exactly the same. If I was to play them for you, the top line would sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And the bottom line would sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So now you know how to play a dotted note and how to count it. I want you to sit and give these 4 different lines of music a go. Pause the video, give it a go, see if you can work it out on your own. When you come back, I'll play them through and we'll see how you did. Okay, so line number 1 should have sounded like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And if you didn't get it right, don't worry, just keep practicing over that line until you've worked it out. Line 2 should have sounded like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, now with the line 3, all I did was switch around the dotted quarter note and the 8th note. Hopefully you worked it out, but if not, don't worry, it should have sounded like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And for line 4, I did try to trick you by slipping in that rest. Hopefully you noticed that, and it should have sounded like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I've added an exercise to this lesson using the dotted note rhythm with quarter notes and with half notes. So please do give that a go to help you get used to how they feel and how they sound. So I've added some exercises to your practice plan this week using dotted notes and practicing counting rhythm. Do make sure you give them all a go. And if you are starting to buy some of your own music in some of your own music books, look out for these rhythms. And when you come across them, you should be able to just play them and understand how they are played.